Recording in progress.
Let's turn it around.
Hello.
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 All right. You guys ready to get started?
Yep.
Excellent. Okay. Well, welcome everybody. I don't know if we wanted, Kim, if it's helpful. We're just curious who's in town hall right now for the committee.
The town hall would be me, Katrina, Martha Dudman, and Derwin Lunt.
And
Okay.
Rick.
So Rick and Jerry are on Zoom.
Yeah, I just can't get my face to show up.
That's okay.
All right. Well, sorry, I was going to join in person at the town office, but my drive back from Bethel took a lot longer than I thought. So I'm here in Southwest Harbor. All right. So tonight on the agenda, we have a quick update on the village planning meetings that we've been having. We're going to follow up on some discussions regarding short-term rentals. And then we have some other land use ordinance updates to start to talk about, including some ordinance stuff, map revision, update on subdivision ordinance, and then the Board of Appeals discussion. So lots to do tonight. And we also have some other members around, and I suspect a lot of people are here to talk about short-term rentals. So we'll definitely be getting to that right off the bat. All right, does that work for everyone? Great. So first update is we've had 2 out of the 3 village planning meetings that we've had advertised for. The first one was in Seal Harbor, and I think we had around 70 people at Seal Harbor, which was pretty good turnout. I've not heard any feedback from folks, but my perspective was it was a really good discussion. A lot of good small group work. And I think a bunch of stuff to build on for both the comprehensive plan update and also thinking about land use ordinance stuff for this group. The second one we had was last Thursday. It was in Otter Creek. Also a pretty good turnout for Otter Creek, I think. There's probably 20 people there, maybe 25 people, I think. And again, continued good discussions from some folks in Otter Creek. What we're doing now is pulling together a summary of the findings, sort of key findings, and a break we can show. We've taken pictures and stuff of the flip charts and maps that people worked on. So we're pulling all that together. We've got email addresses from everybody who signed up. So what we thought we'd do is publish once we're done with Soamesville, which will be November 1st. We'll just pull all the key findings together, basically broken down by village, and then we'll have that available on the website, and we can email it out to people who are interested. In addition, we've prepared it's really a Google Forms, so it's like a little survey, which there's a bunch of people who called and said they couldn't show up, and we prepared basically the same kinds of questions that we asked the participants at the meeting. And we're going to email that to people who have asked for it. So it was good. I think it's been a really positive experience, hopefully for participants as well as for us planners. And I think it's a good way to kick off more comprehensive plan scale thinking. Any questions? Katrina and Kim, you were at both of those. Anything I missed?
I thought it was very interesting that Seal Harbor had so many summer people still in town that attended the meeting.
Yeah, there were, I'd say, probably a little less than half, but almost half of the people that were
Almost
there.
half, yeah, great turnout. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
But I think the average age was probably 60.
Yeah.
You know,
Yep.
so, but is that the average age of that community?
I don't think that would be out of line. Yeah. In the thinking. I think we'll have a better discussion about it once we have a chance to kind of pull together what the common themes, but, we asked 3 different questions, of folks, tell us what you love about your village, let's identify some special places in your village and, talk about some things that you wish were part of your village that might not be part of your village. So questions like that. And, just to see what common themes there were that came out of that for each village, and then also kind of across the board, if there are any kind of common themes. So we're starting to pull all that together. And that should be available pretty soon. So it's good. I think it was a really good exercise.
It was interesting in both Seal Harbor and in Otter Creek, the common theme that they're missing was the post office.
Yeah, post office was a big deal. Parking was a big deal, but we don't want more parking, but we have a problem with parking. So it was really interesting.
And we want Bar Harbor.
Right.
Bar Harbor was another common theme. Yeah.
Bar Harbor was this common theme on what do you like about your little community?
Yeah.
You're not Bar Harbor.
And I thought it was, what's come out of it, also was, the need for, and this sort of relates to stuff that we'll be working on, but, there is more thought that needs to go into creating zoning that is more specific to a particular village and not necessarily a blanket ordinance that applies to the whole town. So in the challenge of doing that, our challenge would be trying to figure out how to do that while at the same time carrying on with the mission of keeping the land use ordinance simple. And sometimes having more words doesn't necessarily mean more complexity. It just means more words. But, I think those are things that'll be interesting to kind of think through as part of a comprehensive planning process. So future land use style thoughts. Anyway, good meetings. Any other questions about it?
And I found it ironic that the Otter Creek community, the people that were there don't want commercial.
Yeah, it is interesting. You know what? Somebody said to me that we listened to what they said the last time, and this is summarizing, not specific words, but, and then we had the town changed the ordinance to allow more flexibility for the nonconformities to exist, when they stop existing. It used to be 1 year, you only had a year to restart it, and then we changed it to 2 years, and I think that helped a lot
That can
in
be
Otter
extended,
Creek.
yeah, by the planning board.
And then another thing, I was at a conference the past day and a half, and there was a couple of sessions on housing. And it makes me think, going back to that, one of the things that popped up was something similar, where you have 1 year for substantial completion of a project once you get approval. And that we may want to just take a look at that and see, because the economy of housing development can change quite a bit, whether or not it makes sense to extend that to 2 years as opposed to 1 year. But anyway, I'm just planting a seed, but I haven't really thought it through, but I thought there were some interesting things that came out of that. That one of the sessions I went to on housing, that was one of them. So. All right. Anything else on the village plans, village meetings, I should say. No plans yet, just meetings. All right. Okay, so the next topic, we're going to dive in a little bit more on short-term rentals. We have created, as we talked about at the last meeting, a draft, very preliminary draft of a short-term rental licensing ordinance. And as I said last time, the purpose of this is A, for discussion, as we've been asked to look into it by the Board of Selectmen, and B, the purpose of the ordinance is really a couple of different things. One, to help us get a handle on the number of short-term rentals that exist in the town of Mount Desert, an accurate number, without having to use a less accurate data source like AirDNA, or pulling together AirDNA and multiple other sources. And then, that really can help the town think about whether or not there's a need for change, how out of balance are is short-term rentals with with, you know, kind of land use needs and policies in the community. That so starting to gather the data to identify the problem is really the starting point. And then we can start to tailor more solutions to whatever problem presents itself from the data. That's not to say that we can't think about what problems might be from short-term rentals. We just don't know to what extent they are in the town and what we need to regulate. I think that's where we left off at the last meeting. I think Rick was there and Katrina. So if I'm not summarizing that correctly, I just want to pause and give you guys the opportunity to chime in. Is that
Right on the money.
right? Okay. So the things that we were going to look into in terms of the short-term rental ordinance, just to kind of tighten up the draft a bit more, are first and foremost the term of the license. In the current draft, I have a term of I think it's 1 calendar year. So we need to think about, and this is from December. It expires on December 31st and renews January 1st, essentially. And I don't know if we want to try to do. And maybe we have to have these conversations a little less specifically, but so the things that I think we need to work on are the term of the ordinance, process for dealing ownership changes, or just at least agree on a process for dealing with ownership changes. Is it any different than what I have in the draft? Do we need to think about, then we really need to spend some time thinking about administration and enforcement. And I think that's also a larger conversation that we might want to have with the Board of Selectmen once we have a tighter draft. You know, how does the town really want to administer something like this? So we can tighten that up in the ordinance and then have a plan, you know, moving forward. And I was at the Board of Selectmen's meeting last night. So Martha and Rick, if I glaze over anything or whatever, feel free to jump right in. And then I think we want to just make sure we integrate whatever sort of simple safety measures or life safety measures. So I was thinking more, we've talked about smoke detectors, carbon monoxide, those kinds of things. And then what type of other information might we want to collect, if anything. And right now the approach is very simple. So whatever the simplest, not the simplest in a bad way, but whatever simple approach that we can come up with to create this licensing ordinance is really the foundation for, you know, understanding the issues in the town of Mount Desert. And this ordinance structure is really designed to be modified in the future as we figure out what we're up against. So a few other things that we need to iron out as we get things tightened up a bit more. So I think things that would be collaborative with the board Board of Selectmen would really be, like I said, the administration and enforcement, and then the fee structure and how that fee structure might be used in the town. So I continue to try to plant the seed for just creative discussion purposes, is whether or not some or all of the fee that's generated from this could be used or dedicated toward the issue that I think gets triggered when people talk about short-term renting, which is really housing. So maybe we can have some creative discussions about that as well. Anyone want to jump in?
I will. This is Rick. And under issues to address and things that we need to be talking about, if you're going to have an ordinance that regulates short-term rentals, the ordinance, the model that we have identifies that as any period of time less than 30 days. We want to be definitive in our process to say, what does that mean? Does it mean no less than a week, no less than 2 weeks, and identify a specified period of time? I have heard from some constituents, not the least of which is our friend Diana May, was very concerned that her neighbor is changing every 2 to 3 days. So she doesn't even get to know these people.
Yeah.
So I think that the time of a rental needs to be looked at, whether it's, you know, a week, 2 weeks minimum, or whatever it is, and wherever it is, you know, by our different zones that we have in our town. So that's one issue that I think we need to take a good hard look at and make sure that we nail down something that's going to be comfortable, not only for those folks who operate Airbnbs, if that's what they call them, but for the neighbors upon which these things will be imposing an imposition.
Yeah, really good point, Rick. But yes, Jerry.
Would that include having to deal with occupancy numbers on a week-to-week basis?
I'll
Well,
have
I
to
think
look.
that's
Yeah.
probably another issue that needs to be addressed is occupancy, and that would be based on the structure itself. How many bedrooms it has, and maybe Kim can speak more intelligently to that, but you know, if you have a 2-bedroom place, you can't have 14 people staying there.
Yeah, well, it would have to be what's designated in the ordinance as a family. The family definition in the land use zoning ordinance says one or more persons related by blood, marriage, adoption, or guardianship, or not more than 5 persons not so related occupying a dwelling unit and living as a single housekeeping unit. It doesn't allow for it, and then it says such groups to be distinguished from a group occupancy is a boarding house, lodging house, fraternity, or hotel. So it does cap to 5 unrelated persons. How you regulate that would be, I suppose if we want to be that, you know, that technical, I suppose with the licensing application, you could state who the occupancies are, what their relation is on the application, but that might be getting too personal. I don't know. But that's something to consider.
And I'm not sure, Kim, and this is just my own opinion, that we need to get that far down into the weeds. If that type of language already exists, then based on any complaint that might be received, that might be the trigger when you say, well, the ordinance says 5 people and you've got 8 people here. That's a violation. We're gonna have that goes against your license or whatever the corrective action might be. I don't know. But
Yeah.
so we don't want to be on the front end of saying, sitting outside counting the number of people that go in.
Right? I totally agree.
Yeah, I mean, if you wouldn't mind, I think that's another good point. And there's probably some model language out there that we could look at to sort of start to frame out, you know, how and if there's an easy way to think more. But keep it simple approach. There may be
Right.
some language out there that we can find that helps us think through that particular challenge. And I don't want to lose part of the conversation about the timing. So that I think we should spend a little bit of time on that because I think it's really interesting as well. So I'd like to get back to that. And I'm also wondering if maybe is there anything else on the list of things that we might be missing from our consideration from my list? Yes.
Hello, this is Diana. Thank you, Rick and other members speak up for me about my concern. And being a person's living right next door to a non-owner occupied Airbnb. I don't think any one of you likes to be in my shoes because when renters came in, after paying the money that they thought they deserved to have the rights or whatever according to what they signed in for, because my neighbor, for instance, when I read his Airbnb listing, he talk about people can park on the driveway free and there's a fire pit for them to use. And fire pit wasn't even on his property. So, and I have to call the fire department in order for they to come in to put out the fire, to ask the renters to put out the fire because the fire caused the smoke that came into my house. And also it was on the property of the golf course. Therefore, there's a lot of dry wood and falling trees behind that could cause fire. So when owner doesn't live there and we have renters that doesn't really care about the community, about the safety. You know, if I am renting a house somewhere else, let's say in Cape May or Cape Cod, and I feel that 2-3 days all week is my time. For instance, from the town data record, my neighbor is supposed to have 4 bedrooms, but I was told by one of the realtors in town that actually it has 5 bedrooms. So I've seen renters numbered from 3-4 people to 12 people, they're housing in that. So that goes back to earlier, somebody's mentioned about, you know, rooms, how many rooms, how we're regulated, you know, how do they get the licensing, you know, renting it out, because he's running a business. And now in the residential neighborhood. So we are getting a business that in our neighborhood. And is he paying the business tax rather than just residential tax? That's one thing. And second thing is, you mentioned earlier in the village meeting, what the village people expect to have, you know, what's the special about the village? I feel very special to live in Northeast Harbor. I've been living there since 1979. So I'm not feeling entitled. I just feel like this is a community that I feel most comfortable, safe, and I like to keep it that way with all the people living in town or in village, not just some tourists coming over, spending 2 days, 3 days, and it breaks the harmony and creates conflicts between neighbors. So that's something that I, as a resident, like to speak up about. And everybody has a choice. If we cannot deal with that situation anymore, next summer happen like that, unfortunately, I have to think about where or should I give up my comfort, my harmony to somebody who spent a couple of $1,000s for 2-3 days. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. I think that's a really good perspective and one that we're definitely trying to figure out how to work through and find that balance. So I appreciate it for sure. Yeah, it's a very, this is a really complex issue. Anything else that we might, other issues, other things that we want to keep thinking more about in addition to the ones that I've already mentioned or that Rick and Jerry brought up?
I think it's important to note, Noel, for our work and as we go forward, we spent weeks or at least more than a few meetings talking about what exactly is the problem that we're trying to define a solution for, and having Ms. May come forward and at least outline, she's what I guess boots on the ground next door neighbor experiencing this in a village where footprints for homes are much smaller than a lot of areas in our town. So Airbnb impact in those types of areas is going to be more readily identifiable. I wish more folks like Diana would come forward and help us identify the ongoing nature of this problem as it goes throughout our town so that we can at least get our best foot forward in crafting the ordinance. So thank you, Diane.
No,
Martha,
I have a
yes.
question. I've read through this, but it's been a week or so, so I've forgotten. Are we asking in the draft ordinance or as part of the application for people to indicate whether the home that they're renting as a short-term rental is their primary residence?
At one point that was in there, Martha. I'll have to go back and look to see. That's like the third thing on the list of things that I want to make sure we cover. What type of information do we need to do we want to collect? Because as I mentioned earlier, if the town of Mount Desert is dipping your toes into the regulatory or at least understanding more about the effects of short-term rentals, what data you collect is actually really important. So are you a year-round, is this a rental that's owner occupied? Is this a non-owner occupied? There's a whole list of things that we might want to try to collect. And it's a better sense of, like, it's a more accurate survey, honestly. If you even, the same kinds of questions we could develop in a survey, we would probably want to put on the application form for the license. It'll give us the same kind of information. So yeah, I think that would be on there.
Good.
Jerry,
You'd have to include some sort of designation of the people that live there all winter and then move to camp for the summer and rent their house out,
Yeah, right,
Yep.
exactly.
which
Yeah.
is a different thing altogether. They still live there, they're residents, but they go somewhere else all summer and park in somebody else's driveway.
yes.
Wow.
Yep. Yeah, and again, I think all of this builds on, so my kind of recommendation, whether or not the town wants to take it or not, is this is a really complex issue. We're just getting started trying to understand everything. Diana's perspective on being a neighbor to a short-term rental is really important information that we need to kind of start to consider. And then think about, as Rick was, I think, alluding to, how do we collect this information and then use these stories to identify A, what the problem is, and B, what other regulatory structures, if any, are necessary to help with that scenario. And as I've tried to say, like, to me, the more I research this issue, it isn't short-term rentals in and of themselves, because they do bring a lot of good things to communities and to individuals. But it's when the good things, or the things that are annoying or bad outweigh the things that are good, that's when things become out of balance. And so what the regulatory structure or the licensing structure is an effort to really do is try to bring balance back. And it could be out of balance in a lot of different areas too. I mean, affordability issues in Mount Desert could be one very small thing, although I continue to argue that short-term rentals are going to be are an issue for taking certain houses off the market that might be year-round. But knowing what I know about the prices of real estate on Mount Desert Island, or in Mount Desert in particular, that's not short-term rentals is like a very small piece of the overall pie chart, if you think about it that way. But there's a lot of other land use impacts that we have to start to think about. So I would say sticking with the licensing process is an easy way to kind of get the data without all the emotion that's going to come with a more stringent approach at this point. But it also sets you up for the ability to make changes in the future. So if you wanted to limit the number of licenses, for example, that possibility is there once you have the structure in place. It's not to say that you're going to do it. It's easier to do with a licensing process. That makes sense?
Mhm.
Okay.
So
again,
the first question is, what is short term, and is short term anything less than 7 nights?
well, I think so I would say what is short term has two factors, right? It is less than 30 days, and it is up to what, like I think Rick was saying, like Rick, to answer Rick's question, now we're just defining the short term. We're not really saying if you're a B&B, if you're like a night or 2 nights or 3 nights. But a lot of municipalities are basically 7 days. If you're a week, is it Saturday to Saturday? Is it Sunday to Sunday? It doesn't really matter, but it's at 7 days to less than 30 days is really a short-term rental.
Yeah.
If you're 30 days or more, you're basically an apartment. You're a rental. And if you're
So
1 night, 2 nights, 3 nights, you could be a hotel or a B&B. There's a distinction between all those uses. Yes,
So
Martha.
in other words, we would be, so what happens to people that are renting their house for 2 or 3 days? Are they not able to get a license? Is that?
I think
what you're
that's the
saying?
discussion. That's the discussion we need to have. Yeah, if you wanted to go that route. Right now, we aren't. That's not what's in the ordinance. That's not what's in the
Okay.
licensing ordinance. But if that's the direction that we're heading, then I think the end result would be yes. If you're a short-term rental, a short-term accommodation, you're between 7 and less than 30 days. something like that. It'll probably be
I
more
think-
refined.
I think that's a good rule, yeah.
Yeah, but that's where this discussion is headed. Yes,
Mhm.
Diana. You're on mute. You're muted. Can you unmute?
Sorry. I
That's
think,
okay.
I appreciate what Jerry mentioned earlier. Is like, I rented a Airbnb in Northeast Harbor between I sold the old house and bought a new house. But the landlord is right next to me. So our little house is right next to her house. Therefore, she's watching us doing anything and make sure that whatever we do on the property is safe and not disturbing other neighbors. And right now I live on, my husband George and I, sorry, George has to work tonight, so he couldn't attend. Across street from us is a big house, also has 6 bedrooms, and they are Airbnb all the time. But we have no problem with that because the owner's parents living right behind it. So they come in and check all the time, and they water the lawn and so on. And we are neighbors, therefore we say hello to each other. This is what I'm trying to get to the board is with investors coming out of town, they are breaking up this harmony and community balance. And they do make money. Otherwise, they won't do this. My neighbor is a realtor, so he understands this. And what I'm saying is, we have more and more people moving out of the village and living in Lamoille or Ellsworth because they can sell their house now for over $500,000 or whatever. And then we are attracting all this out-of-towners, investors saying, hey, I can make money in this town, and because there's a demand. So I'm not saying only for my comfort that some other people should make money. I encourage, making money. I was a business person as well. I'm not trying to stop other people making money. I'm just saying I'm glad we have this conversation about maybe licensing or something has some kind of regulation. Therefore, we can live in this beautiful town and together. Thank you.
Thank you. So does it make sense from the committee to we'll modify the draft and come up with a version that has the 7 days, sort of that's the
Maximum
minimum,
7.
the minimum amount we'll say.
Minimum 7, minimum 7, maximum 30
Yep. Does that work?
consecutive days.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think there's something in the ordinance that I have called a residential rental accommodation, and that is probably going to come out and get combined with some other thing. So there'll be a revision that'll be a little more refined than me just saying 7 to 30 days. But yes, Jerry.
Aren't I fun to have along? There's a lot of people that live in their house and rent out a garage apartment. And some of them do it, and so it's like 1 bedroom, 1 car. Is making it a 7-day thing going to mean that they can't rent those out for 3 or 4 days to leaf peepers, or?
Yes.
That's right, yeah.
Because I don't think there's any bad effect from somebody renting out one bedroom apartment
Well, it basically.
for less than 7 days.
Rental, yeah. Doesn't distinguish with the number of bedrooms and. Right. Still, a rental is a rental.
See, I think that could be a major problem for some people that are doing that to afford to live in their house year round.
Seems unlikely
find somebody to rent it for 7 days, though. I mean, people are crazy to rent places here.
Yeah, but in the fall, if you're, I mean, I just went with 6 girlfriends and we rented a house for the weekend. It was fall, it was the weekend, and there were 6 of us.
Yeah.
7 of us.
And there's
No,
a
I
lot
think-
of people that can't take a week and they come for 3 days
Right, they just come up for the weekend.
or the midweek and when their kids are safely in school and they don't have to worry about them.
Let me think about it a little bit and see if there's a model or some language that we can come up with that is simple and accommodating. The simplest, obviously, the simplest option is to say, this is what you have to work with. There
Well, there
may
might
some
be-
other ways we can think about it. Seasonally
No.
too, yeah.
No, there might be some language out there that differentiates between the property owner being on site and the property owner not being available. Where it's just a standalone rental. Who
Yep.
knows? In Jerry's example, you got the homeowner living in the home and renting the upstairs garage apartment. They're there to, manage and, or whatever. So I think we have to be cautious in how we craft this ordinance.
Yeah, actually, the first thing that came to my mind wasn't necessarily figuring out the language to allow that level of flexibility. It's how you enforce that level of flexibility. So,
Right.
Yeah.
a wholly different question, but I think, I sound, again, in the spirit of we're trying to keep it simple, but be accommodating and really trying to figure this out in a methodical and iterative way. I'll definitely go back to the drawing board and see if we can come up with something. Sorry, Rick, were you going to say something else?
No, I was finished. Thank you.
Okay.
Personally, I don't really care. It's 2-3 days or 1 day. A lot of people, because like Astiku is always a weekend wedding place, and we do need 2-3 days rental. I really am not against 2-3 days rental. I'm more against that somebody just running a business in a residential area. If we allowed it in the zoning, then there should be a regulation, whether they should be also at the time being regulated as a commercial. That's 2-3 days can be very nice people, and whole months can be very nasty people, and we can't really,
Yeah.
for sure, just by days to regulate. It's really the owner needs to be regulated.
Yep, I think you're describing one of the inherent challenges of what it is that we're trying to do. And from the land use side, it is still a residential use. So if you use your residential use once a week or once a day, it's still a residential use, and that's part of the struggle. It's not necessarily considered a business at this point. So I think that's where we need to do a little more research, but I understand
Right.
what you're trying to say, but that's
what
I think one of the inherent challenges of this particular use. And then I really do think, down the line, and when you do the research and look at other communities and how they're dealing with this issue, because Mount Desert is not the only one that has to deal with it. We're just getting elevated to a point where, now we need to start paying attention to it. And I think the goal here is to just be prepared thoughtfully to address the issues as they come up, as opposed to being reactive to an issue that comes up. That's the message I think I got from the board. But it is a land use, where the land use tools come in is starting to understand what effect that activity has in an area like a neighborhood. And I think Rick was mentioning this earlier. We don't really understand that yet. Then we can start to think about, okay, here's the land use tools that come into play to help, we want to keep this neighborhood a certain way, and how do we do that? I don't know. I know a lot of questions to ask, but I definitely don't know all the answers at this point. So that's sort of what we're thinking through, I believe. But we're not the only ones. I mean, this is an issue everywhere, not just on MDI, up and down the state, other states. We're actually working on a full-on toolkit for short-term rentals and trying to identify, some other case studies that we can use to help with this process too. So it's complex, it's emotional. The only other thing that I really would urge is the methodical way to think about this will take the emotion out, or hopefully it won't take the emotion out of the discussion, but it might minimize the emotion in the discussion so we can actually have a conversation about how we deal with this. How do we find that balance within this community? And that's the question I keep trying to ask.
Hi, Matt. I have a question.
Sure.
This is Lincoln Milstein from the Quiet Side Journal. No, are you trying to, do you have any data showing whether, I'm sorry, do you have any data showing how many, how many year-round homes for a period have been turned into short-term rentals? And we can pick a time frame, 5 years, 10 years. So in the town of Mount Desert, do you have any data showing how many year-round homes have been turned into seasonal rentals?
I don't have that data, Lincoln. I think that's one of the inherent challenges in this particular use is the data that you're really looking for isn't as easy to find as you would maybe think it is. Properties, even if you're a year-rounder or whatever, could be bought in an LLC name or some other way that makes it a little more difficult to track. It's more perception at this point, which is exactly the reason why I think we're recommending this licensing ordinance in order to really try to figure out what we're dealing with and where. We could also, at the end of the day, just for planning purposes, start to map, okay, here's the concentrated areas where short-term rentals are, and that again helps you think through some of the land use impacts of that. But it might if you recall, like way back when we first started trying to talk about this, I had some information that just presented, here's what we were able to find on AirDNA. And it's not as easy as just going to AirDNA and saying, this is where all the rentals are, because we all know that some of them aren't going through Airbnb or or the groups that are in that data pack. But it does start to show you little concentrations of where, short-term rentals are. Which is kind of interesting, place to start to think about it. But I think this licensing process will help, again, collect the data that I think that we're looking for.
Well, because
One
I
way-
bring that up because it's a multifaceted problem, right? It's not just about not liking short-term neighbors. It's also about the transformation of year-round housing stock to a economically more attractive right housing stock. They're turning it into essentially a seasonal community and destroying the year-round community that's in Northeast Harbor.
Yeah, well, see, this is where I would say we have to be careful to make that direct conclusion, because that is only one contributing factor to what is making the town of Mount Desert more of a seasonal community and less of a year-round community, or villages more seasonal than year-round. It isn't just Airbnb. It isn't just taking those units and turning them into weekly rentals. There's so many other factors that are going into that. And that's a housing question and not a short-term rental question.
Well, that's why we need the data. So,
Yep. So that's exactly why we're wanted to do this licensing ordinance. If you make the connection that way. Yep.
Thank
I
you.
agree with you. The data is really helpful.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you
Work.
for the question. Actually, it's not that difficult to find out. Give me a week, I can give you a number. Because all
Awesome.
you have to do is go into VRBO, Airbnb, and other website and started counting and just put it in Mount Desert. And then you can start it taking down houses, names. I don't think that's a big problem. If you really wanted to know, yeah, that's my suggestion.
Yeah, I mean, again, we've done a bunch of that research already to try to figure that out. There's some inaccuracies in it. I really don't think, but I think, getting to Lincoln's point, or question, I think, was trying to correlate whether or not weekly rentals are a cause for changes of, neighborhood character, because things are going from seasonal to year round, or from year round to seasonal, or from year round to weekly rentals. Like, that's a fundamental housing question more than it is just a weekly rental problem. Like, I
Well,
think
you
that
can
if you take a
tell
pie
from-
chart, if we really want to, if we want to make this a housing discussion, which I think we need to do in the town of Mount Desert,
But
then
we need to do it at some time when we're not.
at a certain
doing this
point, right? The housing discussion is, if you think about it in terms of a pie chart, there's a lot of things that go into the pie chart to make housing unaffordable in Mount Desert. Lots of things. And we have data, we can find data for a lot of those different things. But it doesn't change the conclusion, which is there's a housing problem in Mount Desert. There's a lot of things we need to do about it. But the thing that we're trying to deal with today is whether or not, or creating a model that the town can consider to start to get a handle on this one particular issue, which is short-term rentals, which we all can agree, I think, everybody's agreed that does contribute to a lot of different things, including affordability and including neighborhood character. And those are things we need to be prepared to deal with.
Thank you.
Noel, did you want to discuss the term of the calendar year? You brought that up earlier as one of the points.
Yeah, I think the
that you-
term is interesting, and maybe, Martha, it's a question of how much, when's the best time of year to, well, there's probably a good time of year if you're a weekly rental owner to try to make sure you're registered by, and how flexible we want to do that. And maybe it's also a question that I was thinking about is, from an administrative perspective, when is an easier time for the town to actually administer, however many hundreds of applications you're going to get by a certain date? You know what I mean? That's a question more for you guys. Right now it's set up as a calendar year, which may be
Yeah.
the easiest thing to do. But I just want to confirm that works for everybody.
No, quick question administratively.
Yep.
Are there organizations that you can hire to do this type of research or?
Yeah, there are. We just pulled some, I pulled a flyer, or Suzanne from my office had a flyer from the meeting that we were at this week. There are organizations that you can hire. And we haven't done a lot of research on them, but there are places you can hire that administer short-term rentals.
Oh,
Yep.
So I'm thinking of staffing issues, not only the perhaps of the overwork, but just finding. I know we've
Yeah.
got positions now we're not drawing applicants to.
Yep.
So I'm trying to think, rather than look at that as a staff position within the town, as long as we get the data, what's the best way to do it? So I just wanted
good
to get that
suggestion.
information.
Yeah, we can do a little research, Darlene, and just kind of put together a bit of a summary, and here's some places to look at, and maybe here's
We can
what
do that.
services they offer and what the cost structures are. And we can start to think about that too.
I'd like to see that. I use that like as an analogy. We do a health reimbursement plan, and we don't administer that in-house for a very reasonable cost. We farm that out, and it works just wonderfully for the employees. So I'm hoping that we might be able to do something like that.
Yep.
and earlier, Noel, you mentioned I believe it's in the ordinance or somewhere I read it, the possibility of using some or all of the fees to pay to go towards affordable housing. Before this meeting, I was speaking with Jake briefly, and he didn't think that would work. But it could, I would think it would make sense for the fees to go toward the cost of administering the application and the oversight.
Yeah,
To me, that makes more sense. And I think from Jake's perspective, it's better.
Sure. Well, I'm not a municipal accountant. I just think you have a potential. So another thing I try to think about with the short-term rentals is it's a resource. Let's turn this thing into an opportunity for the town as opposed to just a burden. So there's an opportunity there to help, contribute to solving a problem that we all know exists. I don't know, and I'm really only planting the seed, Martha, much more than saying this is exactly how you do it. Haven't done
Okay.
any research
Yeah,
at
well,
all.
I
to
just want to
figure out if it's
caution
worth-
you that that may
Yep.
not be feasible.
Yep.
No,
But
if I
but I
may,
do like, what was that, Rick?
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. Go ahead.
No, I was gonna say, I think that, number one, I would say in ordinances, one of my number one rules that I learned a long time ago is try not to put the actual fee structure in the ordinance because it really doesn't give the board time, the ability to make adjustments on an annual
Right.
basis. So
Right.
we'll keep the fee structure. It's not written to be in the ordinance. It's sort of written to be decided by the board.
Mhm.
And then, whatever, that we don't have any recommendations on a fee structure yet. I think that's a conversation we would want to have once we get a little farther along in this process. And then we can also tie it back to the research that we might do for you guys to consider, administrative support.
The only thing I was going to suggest, Noel, as we go forward in terms of the length of time, the timing issue, whether it's January to December, is rather than having a start date, simply have an end date. We know that it ends on the last day of any calendar year, but it would mitigate a rush on the town office in terms of approving or reviewing and approving licenses. Should anybody, they know that the licensing period can be from January to December, but if they're interested in getting into the game in May, well, they already missed the January deadline, so are they screwed through to December and they have to wait till the next year? I would suggest not. That if you just have an end date or the expiration date of any license, then people could jump in throughout the course of the year and licensing applications could be reviewed as they come in, rather than having a whole bucket load of them dumped on the town office by, say, the early December, so that they make sure that they have their license in hand come January 1st. I just think it's instructive to have an end date, but a start date is not necessary. The start date is when your license gets approved. And they could approve them just as if people review and sign up to get their new license plates or whatever. Those don't all happen on a particular start date. They're spread out throughout the year. Just
Yeah.
something for us to think about.
Yeah, in fact, I think the ordinance is more or less set up that way. I might have to tighten it up a little bit, Rick, but it's a good point.
When we institute the licensing of these things, are we supposed to anticipate a whole bunch of people just taking out licenses just in case they decide someday to become an Airbnb, or do they?
Well, we haven't actually, see, that's maybe a reason why not to say you only have 300, short-term rental licenses or whatever. But there's no limit to the number of licenses that you can issue in this draft.
Okay, because Bar Harbor had a flood of people taking them out just in case.
Right,
I see.
they were aware, and that could happen when and if the town gets to a point where they're going to propose, limiting the number of licenses.
But then again, it's just a license for a year. So if they do it just to be preemptive, the town gets the licensing fee.
Correct.
But then it skews the data also. If we're using that collection of information based on the number of licenses given out, it doesn't give us an accurate picture of how many are actually renting.
Maybe part of the licensing procedure, if you're renewing a license, should be proving that you actually rented them the year before.
There may be, I think we've already found some language to that effect, Jerry.
Okay.
Yeah, we just didn't, there's a lot of different models out there. I remember reading one of them that had something to that effect. Yeah, again, the message that I would continue to put out here is we're trying to understand what short-term rentals are in the town of Mount Desert and what issues they may or may not pose in terms of that balance of that being, in terms of whether or not that particular use is out of balance with what the community wants. And we're not putting any strict regulations on it. There's some life safety things that you've talked about. including just making sure that you have sort of the basic stuff. And then there's probably some things that I think Diana's message was interesting. I want to go back and look at a few other things, like in terms of that enforcement area for, you know, if you're bugging the year-rounder next door, you know, there's probably some things that are out there for models that we have to look at. But so it's a, you know, unless you tell me otherwise, the approach I've been directed to take is really, here's what we're trying to do. It's a very simple first step.
Right.
And I think it will help you be prepared to take more steps if those are necessary, but not create a sense of panic in the community that we're going to just start shutting down short-term rentals.
I think it's a good start, Noel. Thank you.
Great. So we have a few things to work on. I'm going to do some research for administration and change some of the things we've talked about, and we'll come back with another draft and see how we go. Any other comments on short-term rentals? Great. All right. Next on the list, we are starting to work on land use amendments for 2023. Kim and I are meeting this Thursday to go over some stuff. Kim, I don't know if there's anything you wanted to add specifically tonight about that, or maybe we just.
No, I think you and I need to meet.
Yep.
To look stuff over.
And are we going to add the rules of procedure for the zoning board of appeals to this year, just as something that we're going to talk about? And I can reach out to Bill, but.
Well,
something
this
you
was
wanted-
my request, actually, not his.
That's on your list, okay.
Yeah, well, this was requested by one of the other board members, was maybe add in the rules of procedure, the process to allow the board members to do a site visit of a property.
Hmm.
A variance. If they're not familiar with the property, you know. I know that was asked of one of the board members to help better educate them when they receive a variance as to why somebody needs to build something in a setback, or, you know, if they could see. That was mainly the only thing that I was gonna add
Okay,
to that.
yep. In the land use map, is that a change that was
Yeah.
basically what we talked about last time?
Yeah, we got 2 property owners that have written letters asking for their zoning to be changed because the town has designated them within 250 feet of a water body, and the property is not even in with 250 feet. And so they want to be zoned more of the residential in the surrounding areas. So.
Yep.
um,
Okay, I mean, so Kim and I have a meeting this week. We're gonna start to work on a few other tweaks to the ordinance as we normally do. The other thing, I don't know, there's not everybody, I know Kim has, I'm gonna just share my screen real quick. So I know Kim, you said in the town office, you have a copy of this.
Yeah, I gave copies to everyone
Yep.
here tonight.
So if anybody wants a copy, if you want to just send me an email, I can email it to you too. But this is like a guidance document for LD 2003, which is the most current legislation that deals with there's an affordability or housing. It's a housing component that we need to start to think. We're going to need to work through and determine whether or not the ordinance actually meets the standards of this new law. This document right here is actually a really good summary that they just put out. To help people figure out this is how you're supposed to apply this thing.
I'd like a copy of that, Noel.
Yep. All right. I'll send it to you.
Thank you.
It's actually really good. I read it and it's kind of helpful. I think there's a couple of clarity questions I need to talk to Andy Hamilton about. And whether or not in certain areas, we've already got a provision in the ordinance that allows for like a density bonus, if you will. So that second dwelling unit, and whether or not that actually helps or counts toward what's in this law. But there's a little bit of work that we're going to have to do probably to help deal with this, to help address this new rule. And some of it may come into play in the new subdivision ordinance.
Hey, Noel,
Yes.
Why is Andy Hamilton involved in this?
Andy's usually the attorney we deal with for land use. We just reviews the warrant articles and ordinance language, Lincoln, that before we put it out for a vote, just to make sure it's all reviewed by legal
Okay.
staff. So he's the
Thank you.
town
That's
attorney.
interesting.
Yep.
Thank you.
Yep. More eyes are better than fewer when it comes to this stuff. Any questions on that? Okay,
Why is it 2003? Are we using 20 years ago's?
I don't know. I think it's
No,
the
that's-
it's the
That's the
legislation number.
That's the LD number of
Yeah.
the legislation, that's all it is,
Yeah,
it's just
it's
the
the-
number that they put on at the,
LD stands for legislative
Legislation.
document.
right,
Yeah. It's does nothing to do with the year.
no.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Well said.
All right. Anything else we need to go over? Great. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you and all.
Appreciate it.
It's over.